I like to really introduce you first, tell everyone who you are and what you do. And you serve and you are the founder and senior pastor of Renovation Church, and it's in the core of Atlanta. And how's that like for you to work in a huge city in the US being a pastor?
It's very busy, very busy, but very rewarding. The hardest part about being in a big city, in a metropolitan area, is getting your arms around all of the needs and the opportunities. And
Yeah.
so everything requires a lot of prayer
Yeah,
and
of
a
course.
lot of strategy and a lot of conversations. But it has been a fruitful work so far.
Amen. And you mentioned in the beginning here that you've been practicing Portuguese and you've been learning Portuguese. And what's the most affectionate memory that you have of our country? Every time you hear Brazil, what do you remember?
I remember the people. I love Brazil. I love the culture. There's a warmth there that I have experienced in few other places in the world, and I really miss it. So we are hoping to be back soon. We were supposed to be back this year, but of course, COVID-19 changed everything. But as soon as we can get back, we'll be back.
Okay, we're waiting for you.
Yeah. So, Léonce, I would like to ask you, this year, the world stopped because of COVID-19, right? So, what challenges have you been facing this quarantine? How is it like to go through a pandemic?
Yeah, I think the challenges are variable depending on which aspect of your life you're looking at. So, as a family, there's actually been very few challenges. In fact, COVID-19 has offered my wife and myself and our kids an opportunity to slow down, to be closer to one another. I spend more time at home. I'm at home right now. This is actually in my living room, and I've been more present with school. We eat breakfast together now, more than we used to because I was always running out to a meeting. So from a family aspect, it's actually been pretty life-giving. I think the greatest challenge has been trying to figure out how to lead a church, not only through the pandemic, but through all of the effects of the pandemic. You know, we're not made to live in isolation. Human beings are not made for that, but we had to do isolation in order to slow the spread of the disease. The church is made to gather in a space and to be a community, but we're doing everything digitally. The financial impact on the United States has affected everything and everyone. And so, there are people who are losing jobs, other people who are being furloughed. And so, of course, that's affected our income as a church and our ability to try and figure out how to do ministry in this new reality. So I think all of those things at the same time. And then you add in the racial upheaval related to police brutality. And so now you have a financial crisis, a pandemic, racial upheaval, all happening at the same time.
And
And
elections this
so,
year.
yeah, and that's just 2020, So, the greatest challenge has been trying to discern what God would have us to do to lead and love well, to make the right decisions, and to ensure as best we can that people feel cared for and feel connected to the body and that their needs are being met.
And that was awesome. You are a pastor, but still a sinner, like all of us. And, you are a man living in this fallen world. So, how do you deal with the personal conflicts of your daily life?
So for about 2 years now, I guess, there's kind of three pillars in my world that help me to continue to lead a healthy life. I have a counselor. I believe in counseling. Especially as a leader, very often we don't have a place to process our leadership pain. I've got a coach. He's an older gentleman who has been an executive. He's been in ministry. He's a doctor. He's done so many things, and so he helps to give me perspective on all of the different things that I'm facing as a man and as a leader. And then I have my community. I have my community of elders who support me, pray for me, build me up, and surround me in a way that helps me to remain healthy. And within all of that, I have my own spiritual practices. There's a book that I love entitled Emotionally Healthy Leadership. There's another one connected to it called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And it talks about the basic Christian practices of prayer, silence, solitude, and discovering which of those things give you the most life. I've been able to stay pretty grounded in the midst of all of this craziness. So like right after we get done with our interview, I'm going to go on a prayer walk. I'm going to enjoy some nature. I'm going to talk to the Lord
That's awesome.
and reset myself for the rest of my day. And those things, you know, kind of putting those pillars in the ground keeps my whole life anchored.
That's amazing to hear. I've been seeing some interviews and knowing more about you and your church, and you are a pastor of a transcultural church. And
Yes.
can you first explain to us what that truly means? What's the concept behind it? And also what Jesus put into your heart when we say transcultural church?
Yeah. So the simplest way I would say that is the narrative we see in the Bible is God has been on this mission to form a family for himself from all people, right? That is the root definition of what transcultural means, is that we want to be a family formed around our identity as God's children, and have that family represent all of the people that are part of the communities that we exist in. And so in the US especially, I don't know exactly how it is in Brazil, there's a great deal of segregation. And so you have Black churches, you have white churches, you have Korean churches, you have Chinese churches, you have Brazilian churches, you have Japanese churches. And so everyone worships God with people who are exactly like them. And what Jesus put in my heart and in my wife's heart when we started Renovation Church was, what if we can get all of these different people to be a part of one church community and bring with them all of their own beautiful and unique cultural expressions and put that in a pot, you know, and make a gospel paella. You know, we have Koreans, we have African Americans, we have Africans, we have Irish, we have, you know, white, we have Brazilians, we have Puerto Ricans, you know, so we've got all of these different people groups represented in this community, which makes our community a more beautiful expression of what God is doing in the world.
Yeah,
That's really nice.
Yeah, God's been very kind to us.
I think that your church is a church that uses the small groups.
That's right.
So for us here, is, you know, we see as the one of the most important things that we have. You know, we have small groups here. We sometimes we say that we are a two wings church. You know, we have two wings here. One like an eagle, you know. So one of the wings is the service we have week after week, and the other wing is the small groups we have. So,
Yeah.
what would you say to a person that's considering not to be a part of a small group, or that doesn't want to engage?
Yeah, I would say to that person that you are eliminating a vital piece of your own life and community. Again, even as I said, related to COVID-19, we were not meant to live in isolation. And so what we see from Genesis chapter 1, what is God's second declaration in the Bible? Genesis 1:26 and 27, let us make man and woman in our image. Genesis chapter 2, you know, the picture zooms in, and God has made the man, he's put him in the garden, given him a job, had him name all the animals. And then what does God say? He says, it's not good for a human being to be alone. And so I will make a helper fit for him. And so from Genesis to Revelation, we see this same rhythmic pattern, that it is God in community with people in community. And so to not be in a small group, when you're not in community with other people, not only are you not getting what you need, but you're also restraining from those other people what they need from you, right? And that's Ephesians chapter 4. Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 4 that to the church God gave apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers. Why? For the building up of the body, for the equipping of the saints. In Philippians chapter 2, prefer one another better than yourselves. Ephesians chapter 2, God has taken the two and made one new man. Colossians chapter 3, now therefore there is no Greek or Jew, slave or free, barbarian or Scythian, but Christ is all and in all. Every one of those passages points to the reality that we need each other, that Christianity cannot be done as a solo sport. And without each other, then we'll never actually experience the abundant life that Jesus talks about in John chapter 10.
You mentioned in one interview also that Jesus not only came to fix our relationship with him, but with each other also.
That's right. That's right. You can tell I'm a little bit passionate about this, just a little bit, because I think it's so important, especially in a Western culture. We are so individualistic. And that's not how God made us to live. And so you're exactly right, is when Jesus came and lived perfectly, how did he do it? He did it in community. And when he died tragically, how did he do it? With his community standing at the foot of the cross. And when he rose triumphantly, how did he do it? He was viewed first by his community, that, the two ladies, Mary and Martha, who then ran back and told everybody else, like, hey guys, Jesus is back. It was always meant to be that. The gospel is about the totality of restoration, because what happened in Genesis chapter 3 was not just a break in relationship between God and humanity. It was a break in relationship between humanity and one another. And that's the brokenness and the cycles that we see over and over again in the human story. And when the gospel intervenes, it's supposed to repair all those things.
Yeah, so talking a little bit about that break, that terrible break, and what caused to the world, I want to talk about a serious matter. And we've been hearing and seeing from all around the world shocking news of hate, discrimination, violence, and prejudice against Black people like you and me. And as a Black leader and as a pastor, how do you think the church must take action and we as disciples must stand in this moment? And what would you also say to a brother and a sister that's living this horrible situation and that has to face this?
Well, let me start with the second question, and then I'll work back to the first one. To my brothers and sisters who are facing the horrors of racism, I would say a few things. Number one, nobody can define you except for the living God, right? You are who he says you are. And so nobody can make you any less than that, not with their words, not with their actions. And know that God is on your side. Why? Because God is a God of justice. Deuteronomy 10, Isaiah 1:17, Amos 4, Micah 6, Isaiah 40, John 10, Ephesians 2, Colossians 3, Galatians 5. I can go on and on and on. God is on your side in this matter. And that means that even if we don't experience it fully now, we will experience victory because the living God fights for us. And number three, hold on to hope, because hope, as Paul tells us in Romans chapter 5, hope will never put you to shame. And so our hope is not in how we will be received by the world. Our hope is in how we have been received by the living God. So that is what I would say to my brothers and sisters, and keep fighting. And that, brings us to the first question, is keep fighting. Because the church is supposed to be what? The reflection of God in the world. Ephesians chapter 1 says that the church is the fullness of Christ in the world. So what does the fullness of Christ look like? It looks like a community of equality. It looks like a community of love. It looks like a community of grace. It looks like a community in which we all stand equal at the foot of the cross. And so if God is a God of justice and Christ's fullness is an expression of a community that embraces all of who God is in and among his people, well, then it is not a choice for the church to fight racism. It is not a choice for the church to stand against injustice. It is not a choice for the church to be at the center of the solution, because it's the very reason that the church exists in the world. And so to preach a gospel void of justice and mercy and equity, well, that's not a gospel at all. It is some truncated aberration of what the gospel is, but it is not the gospel. And the church's call is to preach, teach, live, share, shape, shepherd through the whole gospel until the world is transformed and Jesus returns to reclaim what is his. And that is the fight that is before us. And if we are not joyfully and passionately willing to engage that fight, well, then I would have to question if we actually believe the gospel.
Everything you said is very practical, so it's not something abstract that we can be in doubt. I mean, the Bible is very clear and it's very punctual, so we really
That's
need
right.
to be the mirror of Jesus here, right? And take
That's right.
action always.
Exactly right. And that's the way that Jesus showed us. You know, the clearing of the temple is probably the greatest New Testament example of that. A lot of people miss the nuance of the fact that in the midst of that moment was not just that they were buying and selling. It was where they were buying and selling. They were buying and selling in the court of the Gentiles, literally restraining their ability to worship God and oppressing them. And Jesus said, this is not right. And he cleared it out. And that's the same heart that his church should have too.
So I want to take it back for just a second. When you came here April last year and you preached about
It feels so long ago.
yeah, and you preached about how God sees us as one-of-a-kind masterpieces. I wanted to relate that a little to a hard thing that we have to face here in Brazil, that's social media and what's been doing to us. And we've been living in a time where it's made of self-glorification, showing a perfect body, a perfect life, and everything's perfect all the time. And we always tend to forget what Jesus sees, how Jesus sees us, and how he truly sees us and wants to relate with us, because we're so busy showing people lies about ourselves.
That's right.
And I wanted you to talk a little bit about our true purpose and how God sees us, and what does he thinks when you say that he sees us as masterpieces, and what does that mean?
Yeah. So let me say this to start. Social media might be one of the most dangerous things in the world, you know, and this is coming from someone. So for everybody listening, understand that that's a difficult admission for me. I've got 50 plus thousand followers between Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. But I'm actually in a discernment process right now where I'm probably going to get off of social media altogether. I'm still praying through that and trying to figure out how I continue to leverage the gift of influence that God has given me. But I find social media so dangerous that I am at a place where I'm pretty firmly decided that I'm going to leave the space altogether. So let me say that. And there are two things I would encourage you guys to engage. One is a documentary called The Social Dilemma. How crazy is that, right? And so the tension I've been feeling is understanding how the algorithms work and you know how it feeds us information. I'm realizing that even the people I think I'm reaching through social media, most of them agree with me already. So I'm not actually pushing into the spaces where I want to see change. And then there's a series of podcasts called The Rabbit Hole. And I think that's worth a listen as well for everybody. And it basically it's the first few stories are about a kid who got radicalized toward white supremacy through social media, and then unradicalized through the same medium, and his kind of crazy journey through social media is a false perception of a false reality. So there's two falsities there, right? Because we only ever present who we think we want people to see us as, right? So even the person we often present on social media is not even the person we want to be seen as. It's who we think we have to be in order to get likes or get follows or be seen or be noticed. And so that's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is the people on the other side may like or dislike a false representation of the person that we are presenting. And so it creates this entire web of insanity that 100% goes against who and what God says you are. Ephesians 2:8-10 says that you are a masterpiece given a master work by a master craftsman. What does that mean? It means that you are one of a kind in the world. God has uniquely shaped you, formed you, wired you. You are beautiful. And to allow that idea to be subverted by a false image of a false self, which is then judged by a false perception, and allow that to derail not only your view of self, but your social psychology. We're literally punishing ourselves. If you're going to stay in the social media space, three simple rules. Number one, remember who you are. Number two, remember whose you are. And number three, only represent that. And whatever anybody thinks, well,
There's always the unfollow button, right?
there's always the unfollow button. And there's always the delete button too.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I think it's an incredibly dangerous space. And if you are not secure in your identity, it's the worst place in the world for you to be. And even if you are secure in your identity, it's still an opportunity for that space to chip away at it.
Unfortunately, we are going to the last question we have here. So this year, the theme of our conference here is until He comes, until Jesus comes. We are focusing on the second coming of Jesus. So, in your perspective, do you believe that Jesus is close to coming back?
Yes, I do, actually. And I'm hopeful for it.
we,
I
we are too.
pray
Yeah.
for it every day. And there's a tension there, right? In First Peter, I want to say chapter 3. It may be Second Peter, so don't quote me on that. Use Google. But it's in one of Peter's epistles. He says that the Lord is not slow as you count slowness, but He is patient. Patient with who? With you, His believers. Why? So that as many as possible can come to Christ, because He wishes that none would perish. And so I think there are kind of two big ideas out of that passage. Number one, God is not delaying just to delay. And number two, His delay is hinging on our obedience to carry the gospel as far and as wide and as to as many people as possible. And once that's done, He's here, right? And so when I look at the kind of the arc of history, the scope of time, the life of the church, I think a lot of signs point to the fact that we are close to the closing of this temporal iteration of human reality. Or another way to say that is, I think Jesus is coming soon. And I'm glad for it.
Oh, me too. So, what message would you say to the youth that is watching you at this moment? what message would you say, thinking about that Jesus is coming to take his church and to get us with him?
Yeah, I would say make your life count. And that doesn't mean that you don't enjoy life. I enjoy life. I eat good food. I drink good drinks. I like to dance. I like to have a good time. Um, but make your life count. God has put you in this world for more than enjoyment. He's put you in this world to be a part of transforming it. And so if we live in a way where we are expectant and anticipatory of Jesus' return, and coupled with that, in a way where we know that we are to participate in inviting as many others as possible on that journey, then we'll have that abundant life that he promised, and we'll be living it when he gets here.
We are rejoicing and also looking forward for the day when Jesus Christ will come back. I believe you too, longing for it. And
Yes.
we also do believe that Jesus
Yes.
is coming back. It's our hope. We live on it on a daily basis. And we'd like to say that we will continue to pray for you, pray for your church, pray for your family. We really appreciate the time that you've spent with us. All the
Thank you.
wisdom, everything you said basically blessed us so much.
So much,
And we're
man.
so happy to have you here. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming and taking your time. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Oh, Janelle, you're welcome. This was incredible, and I'm so grateful for the time. So thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Léonce, just before leaving, can we take a picture with you just for to post on our Instagram?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Absolutely.